So hello everyone and welcome to Stephanie Kim's Artist in Resident Talk. I'm Nathan Stanfield, the studio manager here at the American Museum of Ceramic Art in Southern California. AMOCA champions the art, history, creation, and technology of ceramics through exhibitions, collections, outreach, and studio programming. Today's Artist Talk focuses on the work of Stephanie Kim, who is finishing up a productive short-term residency here at the AMOCA Studio. AMOCA's Artist in Resident program, established in 2012, is one of the few long-term fellowship opportunities for ceramic arts on the West Coast. Our residency program, which provides artists an opportunity to produce or develop a new body of work, is funded through the generous support from Julianne and David Armstrong, Laguna Clay Company, and the Wingate Foundation. Today, Stephanie will be sharing some of her recent work and talk about her time as an artist in resident at AMOCA. Now I'm excited to tell you a little bit about Stephanie before we get started. Stephanie Kim is a former software engineer who has transitioned to ceramics. As an artist, Stephanie is constantly pushing herself to explore new techniques and styles, always striving to improve and evolve her craft. She creates figurative forms, each one being illustrative and expressive. Stephanie's work has been in several juried and international or invitational exhibitions. Stephanie began her residency at the American Museum of Ceramic Art in October of 2024. She has completed many other short-term residencies, including Clay Studio of Missoula, Baltimore Clayworks, A.I.R, Vallauris, and Red Lodge Clay Center. Before Stephanie starts her presentation, I want to remind everyone this talk is being recorded and there will be an opportunity for Q&A after the presentation. I will now turn the presentation over to Stephanie.
Great, thank you, Nathan. I will start sharing. Here we go. Hi, so my name is Stephanie. I'm a ceramic artist based in Southern California. So a quick history about myself. I grew up nearby in Rancho Cucamonga, hence I'm the local artist in residence for the past 5 months. I studied computer science at UC Berkeley, and then I went on to be a software engineer professionally in San Francisco for 8 years. So I worked at Yelp, and then I worked in the Chrome operations department in Google. So background of my art history. In high school, I used to do lots of 2D art. So I was really into painting and drawing. I went to a private art teacher thing on weekends. So it was lots of colored pencil, graphite, charcoal, watercolor. And my instructor really focused a lot on strong foundations of, just really detailed drawings, proportionate things, just really being able to render like a correct image, I guess. And so here are some examples of my work. I was really into shading and really technical skills, and some other colored pencil stuff, some paintings, and some charcoal work. But despite my obvious penchant for art and stuff, I decided not to pursue that career, probably because of my parents, but that's like every immigrant child does. And so I went to Berkeley and I wanted to be a doctor, I think. And then I quickly realized that wasn't for me. And then all my friends were taking computer science because I was in the Bay Area. So I decided to do that. And then I graduated and I became a software developer in the city. My first job was at Yelp. And so I really loved it. I really enjoyed my career as a developer. I think I learned a lot from it. But luckily, I discovered ceramics. And the pathway to that is actually kind of funny. In the city in San Francisco, if you're a software developer, you either have two hobbies. You're either a rock climber or you take a pottery class. So I eventually did both, but I started with pottery. And so in 2018, I take my first throwing class. And I quickly fell in love with it. I thought it was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. My first throwing class, I couldn't center anything. So I didn't make anything, but I spent like the whole, I think 6 weeks just trying to center. And I was really proud of like what I made. And that's me with my biggest bowl that I made. I was really happy about it. And then the third picture is actually my first underglaze drawing. And so then I progressively kept throwing more large things. I took a throwing large class, which I actually taught my own version this recent session. So I'm just more and more getting my feel into the clay, like really trying to master this thing called wheel throwing. And so this is kind of before and after. So 2018 of me starting, I was like 24 at the time, very little. And that's me kind of towards the end of my time in San Francisco. And then so during this time, I started to really kind of think back towards my high school days of loving to draw, and I discovered underglaze pencils. So I started doing these pet portrait commissions, and I really enjoyed doing it. People really liked it. Like some people would buy it just because they like their pet, or like a loved one had their pet pass away, which is really sad. But I did a lot of these, and I really enjoyed recording these like time lapse videos of it too. And this is on my website. I made a lot of pet commission mugs until I got really burnt out. And then so I put a pause on that, but now I'm kind of like starting to get back into it. But it also shows off my old mug forms, which has changed dramatically over the years as well. And I also really love portrait drawing. And this was also interesting because at the time it was during COVID. So the only model I had was myself. So I just focused on drawing myself and really studying portrait drawing and how to draw that on a form. And I moved on to trying different, like constructing different vessels and still really focusing on using my pencil. The middle one is an interesting piece that I took maybe like 2 years to complete because I was just kind of um, gathering different life experiences and kind of patching them on to this form, and kind of creates like this really chaotic dreamlike state inside my mind of my memories. A lot of that's kind of, I see it based like my 20s based in San Francisco. So you see like the Golden Gate Bridge, me masked up, some pottery stuff, and just like pictures of like other memories. And at the time, I also was starting to dip my toes into figurative sculpture work. And in August 2022, I found out about this thing called residencies. And so I did my first residency at Clay Studio of Missoula for a month. And I took the entire month off of work. So it was like my first time just only doing ceramics for an entire month. And if you haven't been to Missoula, it's this amazing, cute place in Montana. And it was just an incredible experience. I had my first like big studio space for the first time, access to large gas kilns. And it was just a time for me to explore anything and everything. And this is the time I've tried out coil building for the first time. So it was really a formative experience for me. And then I decided to do more residencies. And then I just kept doing more and more. So for the past 2 years, I have done a lot of residencies, Clay Studio Missoula, Baltimore Clayworks, A.I.R Vallauris, Red Lodge Clay Center, A.I.R, and now AMOCA. All these were short-term residencies, usually 2 to 3 months. AMOCA is my longest one at 6 months. And the best part about these residencies is just seeing or like meeting all these wonderful people. So these are like all friends and cohorts. Yeah, that's us at the Bray. This is at Red Lodge Clay Center. We took a little field trip to the Bray. And then on the right is my cohorts and Beth, the director at our show. And right before my residency started in October at AMOCA, I took a field trip, or not field trip, I took a little trip to Korea. So I'm Korean American. I grew up with Korean parents, and I hadn't been back to Korea in like 10 years, I think. So on the left is like my best friend and I, we like to travel together, and that's in Seoul at the palace that they have there. And on the right picture, those are my two cousins who I hadn't seen in like 15 years. And it was really great to see them. And like my Korean is fine. Like I talk with my mom primarily in Korean, and I didn't have any issues talking to my cousins in Korean, and they also speak English, so it was fine. But and I always thought that my Korean was pretty good until I went to Korea and I realized how bad it is. So like you don't really notice like all the vocabulary that you don't need to use until you end up in these different situations. And it kind of made me like question like how Korean am I? Am I Korean? Because when I was in Korea, people really saw me as American. Like my cousins were like, "Oh, you like to eat that?" Like I'm like, "Yeah, I grew up eating this." It's like so it's kind of like a weird thing of like in America, like I'm very obviously Korean because of my parents, but then back in Korea, it's like you're kind of seen as something different. So I was having that on my mind. I started my residency, and this was the first day I moved in, and then that's how my studio looks right now. And I came in with some bisque work that I made back in my last residency at Cobb, and I glazed it here. And at the time, I was really exploring like female empowerment and like the grandeur of this like religious artwork that you would see in museums. And I was really interested in like just the whole fanfare of it, like very, big crowns, Mother Mary holding Jesus. And I thought it'd be funny to do a little cat instead. And I like orange cats, so I chose that. And also, again, these are self portraits. But then as I was making this, I started to think more about like my current identity. And I was like, what? I was like, we're so used to seeing like Western royalty and like we know what that looks like. And so I thought, like, well, like, what does that look like in Korean culture? Because that's not something we see, over here in America very much. And so the first thing I thought about was the clothing. And so there's this thing called hanboks. They're traditional Korean garb. Mostly they're worn nowadays on New Year's, like lots of children wear it on New Year's, but also on special occasions like weddings, sometimes funerals. So that's what it looks like. That's me as a kid wearing some hanboks. It's very cute. And so I did some research on Korean royalty, and that was like the last empress of Korea. And so Korean queens would wear this giant headpiece, and it used to be made of hair, apparently, like a wig kind of thing, but it was too heavy, so they transitioned to wood. Um, and the middle piece is just like a period piece drama where they would make like recreations of this. And so I thought it was super interesting because like it's kind of like their version of a crown. And so I wanted to kind of study that. So I made my own bust version of it. It's kind of like a self portrait, but I wanted to try making this bust, this figure that is um, just Korean, nothing like crazy about it. Just it was kind of like a study that I did of traditional Korean garbs and headpieces. And I also noticed that in drama reproductions, but also different images, that these wigs that they would wear was very creative and very like enormous and grand. So I wanted to also create a figure that had this big hair, but also little head pieces, these little jewelry. And I noticed a lot of them have flowers and lots of motifs to nature. So I made that, and also noticed that I also did. It's also wearing a hanbok. And so then at the time, Beth and Pam came up to us and was like, "Hey, do you guys want a show?" Which was like totally out of the blue. And so of course we were all like, "Yeah, of course we want a show." And so this is how the show looked, and I will go into some more detail about how I came up with the pieces for that show. So far, I made these two pieces, and I wanted to explore this more. I started to think more my Korean identity and how I'm kind of losing my skill of Korean language. And I wanted to, and it kind of felt like it was kind of questioning my identity. And so that's why so another question I get about these pieces is like, why do they have no pupils? These pieces are kind of like a real what's it called, a real creation of what I feel is my Korean identity, and it feels kind of farther away, like it's kind of fading away. So I didn't want them to feel like real people. I wanted them to feel a little more imaginative, ethereal, kind of fading away. So that's why they don't have pupils. Their heads are kind of big. They're a little cartoony. And so then I went on to make a whole series of these sculptures. And they all have like kind of like a kind of a small detail that relates to me. For example, the one on the bottom left corner is like a cacti with persimmons on it. And the cacti kind of is a reference to my Southern California history growing up. And the persimmons are a reference to just this culture in Korean culture and also other Asian cultures of eating persimmons. And I grew up eating persimmons. And then I started to think more, or started to just research more in general about Korean pottery. I think up until then, it was very much like I was only into like the contemporary side of it, no, like just finding out like through Instagram and other outlets like what people are doing today. But I knew that there was like this whole history behind Korean ceramics. So I started to look more into it, and so these are traditional like real vessels from the Goryeo dynasty. And back then, they were really known for this beautiful blue-green celadon glaze and also really intricate inlays and intricate carvings. And so I wanted to do something similar. And so I did a self-portrait with carvings with a celadon glaze. I tried to find one that was kind of green, but it didn't quite match up, but it was like a little reference to it. And I made two more to go with the original bust that I made. For me, I added pupils to this one because I wanted this one to actually feel like a self-portrait. I wanted to feel kind of like I'm kind of enveloped and emerging in this like Korean culture that I'm kind of like reclaiming for myself. And next is the Joseon dynasty. And so during this time, there's lots of moon jars, porcelain moon jars. And moon jars are also very commonly seen now in contemporary Korean artists as well. There's just something really beautiful about it. They're really, really hard to make. I think these were thrown as two pieces and joined together. And I noticed that a lot of other established artists today and lots of emerging artists are making their own versions of moon jars. So Yoonji Kwok is an artist who she does like these big moon jars and like just piece by piece with porcelain, she makes these big moon jars that are really beautiful. And I feel like it's a great contemporary take on moon jars. Stephen Young Lee is another Korean American artist who breaks up, kind of like tears these moon jars and also adds like different kind of modern day motifs like this tiger. And Tyler, who's a resident at Red Lodge Clay Center, he also kind of studies and kind of introspects on his own Korean American identity through moon jars. So I really liked all three artists. And there's lots of other Korean American artists who do moon jars. And so I kind of wanted to try it out myself because up until then I hadn't actually thrown a moon jar before, but I felt that it was kind of this rite of passage that I wanted to be part of. And so I became kind of obsessed with trying to learn and figure out how to make moon jars. And so I maybe threw like 40 or 50 all in porcelain, and they was incredibly difficult to do. So I was making moon jars and kept making more and more moon jars. And I found that it was kind of like I was getting obsessive about this. I wanted to create a piece just about these moon jars. And so this piece is also in my show. I feel like it was kind of like a funny take on it. Just like my own personal obsession with moon jars, but I feel like the world in general, the ceramics world is like when you think of Korean ceramics, it's always moon jars. Like on Instagram, it's always moon jars that people record themselves making. So that's my little kind of homage to that. And then I decided that in addition to like the 9 busts that I had, I wanted to also make a bunch of moon jars for the show. So I made a bunch of moon jars with holes in it to hang. And I wanted to do it in Celadon because that's a Goryeo Dynasty Celadon. It's not quite the same shade, but it's what I had that worked well with this porcelain. And so that's what it looked like in the show. And I'm really happy that I included this. I think it kind of looks back on my history or history in ceramics, starting with pottery and throwing. So even though I do mostly like figurative sculpting nowadays, I feel like pottery is kind of like where I started and I wanted to showcase that. And so that's what it looks like. And also, these are my other 2 cohorts, Michelle and Reniel. So they also have their own sections of the show. The show is up until April, so please go see it if you haven't seen it. It's a really great show. And so going on to my current work, so I wanted to do more carvings and more celadon, and I will also wanted to make a lamp. And I was thinking about the Christmas Story lamp, and I really like that movie, and I think it's really funny. I always thought it's so bizarre how they just had like this lamp with like it's like this really sexy leg. But I wanted to create my own version of that. So I made these legs just with sneakers though. And I felt that it was kind of like an interesting take on this very classic American look, this story of this Christmas Story leg, but I wanted to make it my own, but also kind of also referencing to my Korean American identity with the celadon and the carvings. I haven't put it together yet, but I'm really proud of this. Oops, sorry, hold on. And so this is some other current work that I have right now. This is like a 3 foot tall figurative sculpture that I have. In my previous work, I would think a lot about what beauty is and how we perceive ourselves in the world. And I wanted to do this like maximalism thing of like, to me, I was like, what's really beautiful? And I thought immediately thought of like a bouquet of flowers. And I find that flowers are just so beautiful. So after sculpting this, I like bought a bouquet of flowers from Trader Joe's and I just put it next to me. And using that as inspiration, I just spent I think a whole week just making these little petals one by one and attaching them. And I felt that it was a really fun experience to just finally sit down and not think about the show and just make something totally new. And also just, it was like a really kind of almost an intimate experience with clay, just the material of clay, making these petals one by one. And that is just, it just came out of the kiln. It survived the bisque. So I'm still haven't finished it. So I'm still deciding what I want to decorate it with, but I'll probably paint something on it. Another piece I'm doing is this figure. I made a similar piece like this before and it had a lot of cracks, so I wanted to just redo it. And for this one, I'm going to do lots of underglaze drawings on it. And I'm also thinking back to my piece that I've previously talked about, where it's like lots of life experiences in my 20s. So I kind of want to do something similar in that vein. So I want it to be like covered in lots of drawings. And it's probably going to take forever, but I have like 2 or 3 weeks left. So that's probably what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the month. And this piece is currently cooling in the kiln. Similar in the floral bouquet vein, I wanted to also do one just on succulents and cacti, referencing that SoCal history that I have. And I also wanted to do a full figure. So I sculpted a full figure. And this is all underglaze pencil. I don't glaze over it. I find that the glaze usually kind of blurs out the drawing. So it is just raw right now. I did paint the hair and I did some eye color and stuff. So I'll see how that turns out and post it later. And so post AMOCA things. So in May, I'm going to be going to a month-long Anki workshop in Jeju Island with an artist named Hyang Jung-oh. This is a recording from his Instagram. So Anki is this traditional Korean ceramic technique where you have this anvil and this paddle, and you use your foot to kick around this wheel, and you just paddle the walls, and you make these giant jars. Some are moon jars, but it's really incredible, and I feel that it's going to be kind of a cool way to like connect even more back to my Korean American Korean roots and really learn from like a master of Korean pottery. I'm going to be staying like in a room in his house, and there's going to be other people in the class. So it'll be a really cool experience for me to just be in Korea for a bit, but also learn something while I'm there. And next, I'm going to grad school for an MFA. I've gotten a few offers, but I haven't decided where yet. So I don't want to say where I'm going because I don't know. So that's what's on my plan for the next 3 years. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I hope that wasn't too fast, but I also have special shout outs. Beth Ann, she's a director. This is all in alphabetical order, so no favoritism. Michelle and Reniel for like my cohorts. They're awesome. I love hanging out with them and being in the studio with them all the time. Nathan and Tim are so supportive in the studio, following my work, but also just being there as part of the residency. And also Pam for like, helping set up the exhibition that we had for our residency. And that's it. Guess I could stop sharing.
Right on. Thank you so much. That was great. Uh, so we have some time for questions now. So please feel free to either type your question in the chat or use the little raised hand emoji, and we will call on you to ask. I think there was one that already came through. So I'll just read the questions out loud. Can you discuss the reason for the oh wait, where's that one? Oh, for the figures' expressions, they all look like they are frowning. Why not make them smile or other expressions?
That's interesting that you think they're frowning. To me, they're very neutral. But I did, uh, specifically not want them to be smiling. To me, it's kind of like a more pensive look, kind of introspective. Um, that show is very much like a personal, like introspective um, body of work for me. So I wanted that to reflect it as well.
Nice. We got another question here from Victor. Uh, what really propelled your switch from software engineering to art? Was software engineering not as fulfilling or enjoyable?
I think about that a lot. It was fulfilling and enjoyable until it wasn't. Like maybe if I like switched companies, I would have felt differently. But I felt that I was more fulfilled through artwork and through these residencies that I was doing. And in general, like growing up, I was very like high achieving. So I still have this tendency to be very like, I want to take on something challenging and then really master. Like I want to be really good at something. So I felt that I did that pretty well at my job. And I got this like promotion to be like a senior engineer and I like felt really happy about it. But then afterwards I was like, I don't know what else I need to do to like feel fulfilled at my job. But with ceramics, I was like doing these residencies, progressively getting into more selective ones. And then like there's still so many like technical challenging sculptures that I want to make. And I also want to go to grad school. So switching over to ceramics was just a natural progression for me. It was kind of like another itch that I was like able to scratch with like my little high achieving tendencies. But I also just felt that I was really happy in the studio. And in my job, it was like sometimes I was happy, but most of the time I wasn't. I was just like really, really bored and upset about being bored. But in ceramics, it's like I'm never bored. It's like you're always busy, everything's challenging, and there's always something else that I want to make.
Yeah, I think that's a very relatable uh, feeling in ceramics. Like never, there's always something to do,
Yeah.
always something to learn. We got another question from Aisha. How do you cope with feeling a little detached with your Korean identity? They completely understand. They're a child of immigrant parents too. And every time they go back to Africa, they feel detached from everyone else.
I think for me, it's connecting with other children of immigrant parents or other immigrants. I feel like the only people that really relate to it is like other um, like people of immigrant parents. Um, like even when I talk to like Chanello, she works here and then she has I think a Nigerian background. But we both like discussed my exhibition and she was like, I totally relate. And it's kind of weird because like our parents make us feel closer to our heritage and our identity, but at the same time, it's like they're also kind of not like their total selves before America either. But I think it's important to feel like find that one or two things that help you feel connected to your heritage. So like for me, that's with food a lot. I know some other Korean Americans are really into Korean dramas or Korean music. And so food is a really big thing that connects me with my mom. So like growing up at home, food is a big thing. And when I go to Korea, like I know all the food. So like I feel very connected in that way. Ceramics is an interesting one where I wasn't introduced to like Korean ceramics through my family. So it's been like my own journey, my own way to connect to Korean culture in my own way as an adult. So that's been really exciting for me to do that.
Oh, that's great. Uh, all right, another question. I was wondering if your career in computer science helped you in your art career at all.
Uh, yeah, I think so. I think it helped a lot with feeling inadequate. I think as an engineer, as a developer in like STEM, especially as a woman, like you're very put on the spot and you're expected to be really good, like really smart. And so a lot of my career was feeling like I wasn't good enough, and like very like, and I think a lot of developers feel the same way. And so I think that feeling of like feeling insecure, like this imposter syndrome, also translates to the ceramics world as well. So when I got to these residencies and I was like around these amazing artists who were like so good at what they do, was I felt that same imposter syndrome, but like I already knew how to deal with that. Um, Also, another weird thing about software developing, it's like you think you'd be coding most of the time, but actually you're speaking a lot, like public speaking, writing a bunch of like um, kind of almost these essays, these papers, these like you're just you have to be eloquent in what you do. And I find that that was really actually helpful when I talk about my art, and also all these residency and grad school applications where you have to write artist statements. So that helped a lot as well. And yeah, it was a good career. I think like I learned a lot from it. And sometimes like those skills translate. I don't think one is easier than the other. They're just both very different. Yeah.
Excellent. Looks like got one more down here from Abdul. What was your proudest moment as an artist so far?
That's a really good question. I think the residency exhibit was my proudest moment. It was super great. Like I think we only had like 3 months to put it together. So it was just constant every day, all day, just in the studio, like making work after work. And there were lots of like hiccups along the way, like cracks that I had to repair and stuff. So it was a lot of strife and time that I spent like putting this all together, and it all worked out. And so I was super proud of that. I was super proud of creating this body of work that I felt was very cohesive with my functional throne work, but also my sculptural work. I was really proud that I was able to put that all together. And it was really fun to see my all my friends and family come out. Up until then, I was always in the Bay Area, so like they didn't really know what was going on in my life, right? And I would be doing these residencies like abroad or like in different states, and they would kind of see like some of my work in my house, and sometimes I would give them mugs, but it was their first time like really seeing it in like this really official museum. And also my high school art teacher, the one who would like help me make all those drawings that I showed in the beginning of this show, she was there and she was super proud of me. So it was like this really like warm, fuzzy feeling that I got. So that was my proudest moment.
Nice. Another one trickled in from Robin. What clay are you using for your sculptures, and what cone are you typically firing them to
Uh,
technically?
in the beginning, I was using B mix with grog, which is mostly fine. I did have some issues with cracking, so then I did have to like kind of adjust my construction methods for it. Right now, I'm using paper clay, which is incredible. I'm finding out that I should have just used paper clay the entire time. Um, and with my bigger sculptures, I have been firing them to O4 and using like low fire glazes and low fire underglazes. Um, but in some of my other work, I've previously always done cone 5 normally. But I do also like to dabble in like lots of like mugs and atmospheric firing, and those are cone 10.
Nice. All right. Last. Oh, no, more trickling in. So maybe you got time for maybe like a couple more questions here. Um, um, how do you balance your work life and clay work, especially during the time you were working at Google?
Uh, so when I was working at Google, there kind of wasn't a balance. That was the problem. I would work and then I would go to the studio. And then sometimes on weekends, I'd have time for my social life. So, like during the weekdays, it was very much like working during the day and then working in the studio. So it felt like I just like had no time for my social life. For residencies, I would actually sometimes take a month off or like take 2 months off. I had this really great manager who was like supportive of like my dreams and my goals, and he just wanted me to be happy. So he was really flexible and would let me take like a month off. So that's how I balanced it. And then it got to a point where I realized that I wanted more than like 4 hours in the studio every day. I wanted to be there for like 10 hours every day. So then that's when I decided to leave Google, put my career on a pause, or maybe never go back to software engineering. And I was at AMOCA at the time. So this was like the perfect place to just be here. So now the studio is kind of like my 9 to 5, and I can do more social things after work or after the studio and the weekends.
Nice. All right. And last question. Could you discuss your companion piece choices for your show and how they relate?
Oh, is it the the blue carving ones? Not
I'm
sure.
not sure. Maybe it's just, yeah. Um, yep. Oh, your Amoka. Oh, the pieces from the collection that were picked in
Oh yes,
relation
yes, yes.
to your work.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a section in the show, it's called Currently Influences. And so me and the other two residents got to choose uh, body like pieces of work from artists that were influenced by or just influenced by those pieces and specifically. I chose pieces from other Korean and Korean American artists. So there were two moon jars, these giant moon jars that were donated from this Korean pottery show that was at AMOCA a few years ago. And I thought that was a really great representation of like what Korean moon jars look like when they're like done really, really well. And I also wanted to kind of show off like other Korean artists that are just incredibly good at what they do. I find that Korean art, like especially with drawing and painting, like they're really known for just like incredible detail, especially with like Korean tattoo artists too. And so I want to show off like other amazing sculptors, other amazing like surface illustrators. So that's why I chose the pieces that I chose.
All right. So we're gonna wrap it up here. So thank you all for joining us and for your excellent questions. If there are more questions, you can DM Stephanie on Instagram. We're gonna drop all of her links and everything in the chat. So for more of Stephanie's work, you can visit her website, stephaniemakesstuff.com, which will be dropped into the chat. If you're in the neighborhood, come visit the museum and the ceramic studio in Pomona, California. The exhibition that Stephanie was talking about is called Currently Artists in Residence. It's on view at AMOCA through April 27th. So come out and check it out in person. Uh, you can learn more about AMOCA, our ceramic studio, our artist in resident program, and our current exhibitions at our website at amoca.org. And a reminder, a recording of this presentation will be available on our website in the coming weeks. So thank you again and see you soon. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.